professor in the Department of History as well as the director of the Middle Eastern Studies program. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Middle Eastern Studies program, the History Department, the History Student Association, the Provost's Office, and the College of Liberal Arts for coming to this event. I will start by introducing the Provost, who will say a few words of welcome, and without whom this event would not have been possible. Then I will introduce our speaker, Professor Cole, after which you will have an opportunity to ask him questions after his talk. So thank you all for coming. Dr. David Dowell has served as interim provost and senior vice president of academic affairs since June 2013. He has been a member of the university for 35 years, and he doesn't look it, but in many capacities as a faculty member in the Department of Psychology, and also as Associate Dean in the College of Liberal Arts and other positions. He received his doctorate in psychology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So please welcome him.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here. This is an extremely important and timely topic. I know that's why you're here. There's really not much that's in the news more than the tensions we're about to hear about today. And I particularly want to thank Professor Cole, a distinguished professor from the University of Michigan, for making time in his very busy schedule. He's an extremely popular speaker to share with us his insights. He has a very interesting biography on his webpage. I encourage you to read it, having grown up in France, spent time in Africa. He brings a wealth of experience and about 30 years of research related to the topic he's going to talk to today. I know it will be revealing and insightful presentation. So I really want to express my deep appreciation to Dr. Cole for making time to be with us today. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Provost. So it's my pleasure and really great honor to introduce Professor Juan Cole. He's been on this campus before, and you must have given him a good welcome because he's back with us. He is a Richard P. Mitchell Collegiate Professor of History at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and you probably know him best as a public intellectual and blogger for informed comment, as well as having a regular column at truthdig.com. He is a prolific author. His most recent book is for sale at a very discounted price outside. It's called The New Arabs, How the Millennial Generation is Changing the Middle East. He's also the author of Engaging the Muslim World and Napoleon's Egypt, both of which appeared just a few years ago. He has written widely about Egypt, Iran, Iraq, South Asia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so forth. He has a full command of several languages, Arabic, Persian, and Urdu, and familiarity with Turkish, has traveled to the region and lived in the region for almost 10 years. So he is very well placed and very well informed in giving us an informed talk about ISIL in Iraq today. And I please give him a warm welcome, Professor Juan Cole.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here at Cal State Long Beach, and thank you all for coming out on such a nice sunny day in Michigan. People will be playing Frisbee, listening to serious talks, but we don't have very many of these there. I want to talk a little bit about what's happened in Iraq in particular, and Syria to some extent in the past few months, and its historical background. Of course, by that I mean the past 10 years of your contemporary history. I'm going to make an argument to you that the general, I think, journalistic and political reception of these events is ahistorical. That is to say, people are not taking into account what provoked them or how they developed. This map has caused a lot of trouble because it's, as with all maps, it's only partially true. But it does make the point that Iraq is a multicultural country with several major ethnic groups, people who conceive of their identity in ethnic terms. And so you have Arabic speakers and you have speakers of other languages, Kurdish and Turkmen. But in the south, that green part, is Arabic speakers who are Shiite Muslims, belonging to one of the two great branches of Islam, who are co-religionists with neighboring Iranians, who are also majority Shiite, although the Iranians mostly don't speak Arabic. They speak other languages, including mainly Persian. The white part in the west and the north is the Sunni Arabs, and up, in fact, to Mosul, which is largely an Arab city now, and which has a population of some 2 million. And it's there, that white part, kind of right now as we speak, is not in fact part of Iraq. It is a caliphate. Who would have thought? And then in the north, where you have the brown part, the yellow is kind of mixed Kurdish and Arab. The brown part is Kurdish. Kurds are mostly Sunni Muslims, so they're co-religionists of the Sunni Arabs. But they have their own traditions. They tend to be more Sufi, which is a mystical form of Islam, or more secular. Jalal Talabani is a member of the Socialist International. And their language is an Indo-European language, ultimately related to English. So the word for brother is bra. You know, it's like the rap song. You can hear the similarity, whereas the Arabic word for brother is ah. Not the same language family. So the fact that Iraq is multicultural is not intrinsically a bar to it being a country. There are lots of multicultural countries. California. But people have to kind of try to get along. And in Iraq, for various reasons, they're not getting along. So the multiculturality is being deployed by political entrepreneurs and religious entrepreneurs to form enclaves that are not part of united Iraq. Now, the Sunni Arabs are the traditional elite of Iraq, although this is often said by journalists, and it's a little bit ahistorical, because while there have all along been some small Shiite communities in Iraq, this thing of Iraq being 60% Shiite is new. People started converting to Shiism in southern Iraq in large numbers only in the late 18th century, early 19th century. So, you know, contemporaneously with Tom Jefferson, basically, is when a lot of people in southern Iraq started becoming Shiite. So saying that the Sunnis have been in charge for, you know, a long time is a little bit silly, because that's all there were, for the most part, until fairly recently. But as people converted to Shiism in the south, it was the poorest people that converted to Shiism. Maybe they were taking revenge on the Sunni government, which taxed them and chased them, and so they were saying, take that, we're Shiite now. It's not clear, you know, when they converted, they didn't write down why they did that. But in any case, the elite remained Sunni, I think is the right way to put it, even after a majority of the country converted to Shiism. So the big landlords, the big politicians, the big import-export merchants who dealt with Bombay and India and so forth. And after the Suez Canal was opened in 1869, dealt with Europe, were, you know, mainly Sunni, although there was also a very substantial Jewish population in Baghdad, and some of them had international branches as well. Now, Iraq was a set of Ottoman provinces, and the Ottomans ruled Iraq in various ways. They ruled it from their capital of Istanbul in what is now Turkey, and sometimes they ruled the whole thing as one big province. Sometimes they've split it up into 3 or 4 provinces. There were appendages to Ottoman Iraq, like Kuwait, which was ruled from Basra in the south. So you'll see people argue, well, Iraq has been 3 provinces for centuries, but that's not true. I mean, it has been arranged in various ways. And the Ottomans certainly tended to deal with it as a unit. The governor based in Baghdad was often in the reporting lines, so people in the governor in Basra would report to Istanbul directly to Baghdad. During World War I, the Ottoman Empire decided to throw in with the Germans and the Austrians and declared holy war on France, Britain, and Russia. They had their reasons for doing this. However, we historians, we don't have many perquisites in life. They don't upgrade the historians on the planes just because they're historians or anything like that. But we do get one perk, which is we get to decide what the really big mistakes in history are. So Hitler opening a second front with Russia, not wise. And joining World War I on the side of the losers, a mistake. And once they declared war on Britain, the British ruled a good part of the world at that point. They ruled India and Malaysia and so forth. So they were a little thin-skinned. People declared war on them. They didn't take it lightly. So they decided to invade Iraq. They actually had their eye on Iraq for a long time. From the point of view, by this time Britain and India is being ruled from New Delhi. From their point of view, Iraq was kind of, anyway, a province of India. Because economically, all of its trade was, or most of its trade was with Bombay. So it was kind of an appendage of the presidency of Bombay, of British India. And they even thought, it's kind of underpopulated. There are a lot of pastoral nomads in Iraq, and more irrigation could be done. So they thought they had too many, Indians, and they might bring some over and settle them in Iraq. They were going to do population transfers. So they invaded, and modern Iraq is basically what the British Indian Army, because it was the Indians that fought. It was Punjabis and so forth. So it's what the British Indian Army could take through World War I. And the British, during World War I, they were kind of frantic because the war didn't go very well the first couple of years, and there were all that, like, hundreds of thousands of British soldiers were killed, and they didn't really make any progress. There wasn't anything to show for it. So they started reaching out, to make deals, and they thought at least maybe they could make some progress in the Mediterranean theater in the Middle East. And so they promised the French they could have Syria after the war. They were carving up Turkey. Then they also, however, they promised Syria to the Sharif of Mecca in what is now Saudi Arabia. They double booked Syria. How sometimes you go to get on your flight and you find somebody in your seat and know the airline has sold them the ticket too. So after the war, the Syrians said the French said you promised us Syria. And the Arabs said you promised us Syria. And the British said, well, bad show, old boy. And so then the French said, well, we're taking Syria. And they invaded and took it. But the British had given it to the son of the emir of the Sharif of Mecca, Faisal. So Faisal was kind of a man without a country at that point. And the British, felt badly. So then they had conquered Iraq, so they had this country, and the British liked to replicate their system wherever they were, so they decided that Iraq, which revolted against the British in 1920, that it might be easier to rule if it had a king. So they brought Faisal to be king of Iraq. Faisal had never had anything to do with Iraq, and the Iraqis didn't know really very much about who he was. But all of a sudden, the British said, "Here's your king." And he, of course, being from Mecca, was Sunni, and he needed constituents in Iraq, and so he reached out to the Ottoman-trained Sunni officers and formed a government that kind of locked the Shiites out of power. And in fact, I found an archival document from the 1940s in which one of the few Shiites who actually got on the cabinet was dreaming that maybe someday there would be a Shiite prime minister. So, presumably he's smiling from his grave now, although as a Shiite prime minister, it's not clear that he's the prime minister of all of Iraq. And the Sunnis remained the major landowning class, although there were some Shiite grandees, but it's not that there were no rich Shiites, but the predominance of wealth and power was in the hands of the Sunnis until 1958, when the people of Iraq rose up and overthrew the British installed monarchy, and Iraq became a republic. They were really angry at those kings and prime ministers who were very pro-British. They had refused to join in the 1956 war on the side of Egypt. They kind of just sat it out. They had joined the Baghdad Pact with the British against the Soviets, and people in Iraq just felt it was a very unequal society, and the working classes and the farmers were very, very poor. There were a couple million landless farmers, and because of economic inequality, because of lack of development, because of foreign policy, subservience to British interests, the monarchy and the government became extremely unpopular. And I have proof that they were unpopular because they got a hold of the prime minister, Nuri Said, and they killed him. And they dragged him through the streets and then they buried him. And then the next day they went back and they disinterred him and dragged him through the streets some more. So I conclude that they didn't like him. The Sunni rural people are still somewhat organized by kinship politics, what we call in English tribe. The Arabic word is really more like clan, it's ashira. And urban people, don't really pay so much attention to kinship politics. And only about a third of Iraqis identify tribal, that they would put a lot of emphasis on their clan. Where the kinship politics exists, it is important. And so you have the Al-Bunasir in Tikrit, you have the Jubur around Salahuddin, you have Dulaim in Al-Anbar province in the west, you have Shamar in northwest of Baghdad, Tai in Mosul, and so forth. So one of the things we're saying when we say that western and northern Sunni Arab Iraq has made an alliance with ISIL, with this terrorist group, and thrown off the Shiite government in Baghdad, is these tribes joined with ISIL. They made an alliance of convenience. Now, ISIL, and I'll talk about this later, is an ideological organization. It's a kind of cult where it uses certain themes from Sunni Muslim history and practice, but then kind of distorts them. And it has a doctrine of a military tactical doctrine of ruling by terror, of using fear and violence to coerce. So it's kind of like, organized crime plus a Sunni Muslim version of an incipient Vatican. So these tribes who felt very much oppressed and neglected and marginalized and actually were being shelled by the Shiite ruled government in Baghdad in many instances, did a deal with the devil. At some point they went over to ISIL. Now apparently some of them are having buyer's remorse and And there's some talk of being able to organize some of them to fight ISIL, to have tribal levies, or what are being called